We're going to start by talking about infinitives. Now, Mrs. Grindstaff mentioned this just a minute ago, but the infinitive is the word to plus the base form of a verb. We know that you've heard about these in your Spanish classes, in your language classes, and actually finding infinitives can be very easy to do. You can all look at to jump or to talk and call that an infinitive.
Yes.
They're easy to locate. But the trick is you need to think about how they're being used, because again, they're not acting as verbs. They are putting on costumes and they're acting as something else. So when I think of infinitives, I think infinitives are the best actors of the grammatical world.
Yes.
Because they're not just going to act like nouns, they're going to act as nouns, adjectives, or maybe even adverbs.
Yeah, they really are they don't care.
They don't care.
They'll take any job.
They're very versatile.
Yes.
They're great actors.
Versatile is a nice way to say it. They're also very needy.
Very needy.
Very needy, yes. And very demanding.
Yes.
Okay.
So the important thing is when you see an infinitive in a sentence, you have to ask yourself, how is this infinitive being used? Now, it's easy if an infinitive is at the beginning of the sentence to think like maybe this is going to be a subject, but you really have to look at the context. So you can see some famous infinitives from Shakespeare. Go ahead.
To be or not to be is Hamlet's most pressing question. That's a picture of Hamlet in one of his many variations there.
Can you see that entire green phrase there is actually acting as the subject?
Yeah.
You could replace that whole thing with it. It is Hamlet's most pressing question.
Yeah, because it's functioning as a noun.
Yes, it's acting as a noun. You can see another infinitive functioning as a noun in number 2 there, right? I hope to write a best-selling novel. That entire phrase is acting as the answer to the question, what? I hope to what? I hope to write a best-selling novel. So we've talked about single words acting as DOs, like I love pizza. Now we've got this entire infinitive phrase functioning as a DO. So it is really cool if you think about it.
It is. And then in addition to nouns, although we'll say that infinitives show up as nouns most of the time, they can also be any of the modifiers that we know. You know modifiers are adjectives and adverbs. And so an infinitive adjective looks like the team to beat is Oak Park. It comes right after the noun that it's modifying, or even the adverb, she is sure, which is a predicate adjective, to have the answer to your question. So that infinitive is modifying an adjective, and as weird as it looks, the only thing that can modify an adjective is an adverb, and so that is an infinitive functioning as an adverb.
Yes, so we'll talk a little bit more about this. As Mrs. Grindstaff said, infinitives are typically acting as nouns, right? So think about these examples. If you look at number 1 there, and I hope you enjoy that picture, right? To eat is fun. That is at the beginning of the sentence. That whole thing is acting as the subject. It's what the sentence is about. If you look at number 2, this one again is answering the question what. It's coming after that transitive verb, and that infinitive is functioning as a noun. You could say I like burgers, but in this case you're saying I like to eat.
Yeah, because we like more than burgers.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think what gets students tripped up is that you see what looks like a verb and you all of a sudden assume, oh, it's got to be a verb. And this is what we're trying to tell you. It's lying to you. It's not a verb. It's just functioning as a single, regular, old noun.
Right. So what you would do is you could underline to eat, and then you would label it noun N/DO. You can see that nouns can also be infinitive phrases can also function as predicate nominatives when they're renaming the subject and following a linking verb. You can see that example there.
Yeah. A fun thing is to eat. So to eat is renaming thing.
And to eat is also renaming in the next example, only this time it's renaming hope. You can see that it's coming within commas, so it's a non-essential appositive.
It's very nice. Reference to the 26 mechanical rules, non-essential phrases. Also, and remember that appositives and predicate nouns look very similar. The difference is a predicate noun has a verb and an appositive, no verb.
Right, and sometimes commas.
Sometimes commas.
And you can see that infinitives can also function as OPs. Some students look at this and they see the word to and they think that it is a prepositional phrase itself. But remember that an OP is going to be a preposition plus a noun, whereas to eat is just an infinitive. It's not an OP. It's not a prepositional phrase. In that case of the last one, the word but is acting as a preposition, and then to eat is the OP.
Exactly. Are you hungry?
I'm hungry after this slide.
Okay, so not only can you have the single infinitive, which is already 2 words, you can actually build a full phrase including objects and modifiers. Look at this example here. To eat solid foods is hard for babies. And you have this picture of a kid eating steak. Do not do that. That's mean. So to eat is the infinitive though. And it's being used as the subject. What is hard for babies to eat is hard. It's the subject. It's the what or who the sentence is about. It just has its own object. To eat what? Foods. And so that OV up there is the object of the verbal. And so we use OV after any of the verbals that we have, participles, gerunds, or infinitives, to denote that that noun is connected in thought to that verbal and they need to be treated as a unit. So the whole thing, to eat solid foods, is an infinitive subject, an infinitive phrase functioning as a subject. And if we were going to parse it and break it down, we could still do that by saying the infinitive is the subject and then we have a modifier plus the object of the verbal together.
Yes, this seems complicated, but with practice, it'll get easier and easier.
In fact, let's practice.
Let's practice now.
Right now. So what we're going to ask you to do, Kelly, Mrs. Van Atta,
sure,
is to find the infinitive in the following sentence and then tell how that infinitive is being used.
Okay, so when I look at number 1, I have my pen here. I'm looking for to plus a verb, and I told you that's the easy part. So I'm going to start here and I'm going to underline to skate. Pardon my shaky underline. This infinitive is functioning as the subject, and one way when I think about this is to look at those sentence patterns. And I remember that the subject is coming here, and this infinitive is functioning as the subject.
So you could just write subject, because that's all it is. It's the subject of the sentence. If we were going to parse the whole thing, we'd say was what, desire, and skate, to skate are being linked. That's a predicate noun, a linking verb. What kind of desire? His only. Whose desire? His. And so it would still look the same as it does when we parse any sentences. You're just going to keep the infinitive together as one. Why don't you do another one for us?
Thank you. Okay, so let's take a look at number 2, and we can go in order here. When I look at this sentence, the first thing I'm looking for is who is this sentence about, right? This sentence is about I'm hoping. So I is going to be the subject here. I'm looking at the verb hope. This is an action verb, so I know it's either going to be a TV or an IV, and I'm asking myself, do I know what I'm hoping? Well, yes, I do. I am hoping to enjoy retirement. This whole thing here is functioning as the DO. So this is an infinitive phrase functioning as the direct object. Now, if you were going to parse this a little bit more specifically, you could call this the infinitive DO, and this is the object of the verbal here.
Yes, but as long as you can get the infinitive and can identify the whole phrases, the whole phrases function, you're good right now. That's all you need to do. Two things I think I want to just remind you. To plus a noun is a prepositional phrase.
To the store.
To the dance. Yeah. So that we're not talking about. We're talking about to plus verbs here. And let's look at the next. Actually, I never go in order. So let's look at. Well, let's look at number 10 because Mrs. Van Atta is a Jazz fan.
Yes, I used to be a big Utah Jazz fan.
The Jazz's hope is to win the championship. Whose hope? The Jazz's. Or subject, what is being said about hope? Hope is what? To win the championship. Does this equal hope? It does. And so we have another infinitive functioning as a predicate noun. It's just, this is what my hope is, to win the championship. If I want to further delineate, I can say this is the infinitive PN right here. To win what? The championship. And that's the object of the verbal. The is an article adjective. I think it's important to remember that when you're looking for the object of the verbal, you're asking the question what. You're not asking the question why or where. You're answering only the question what, because nouns, that's what they respond to. They respond to what.
Should we do more? Should we move on?
I think we should just leave the rest for you guys to do. Yes. So you can pause this right now and work through them on your own and come find us and we'll tell you if your answers are right.
What a great idea. Moving on. All right, so we mentioned that infinitives typically do function as nouns, but occasionally you're going to see an infinitive that comes right after a noun and describes it. Typically it'll answer which one, right? And so if you look at this example, it says the book to read next is Beowulf. I'm getting very excited about this. We hope you are too. And so as far as this sentence goes, we know that book is the subject. We know that is a linking verb and Beowulf is a PN. What's going on in the red there is that infinitive phrase is answering which one. It's in some ways like an adjectival dependent clause. It comes right after a noun and it describes it. You can see that in number 2 as well. It's a story. Well, what kind? A story to capture interest. So occasionally you'll see an infinitive right after a noun and it's answering one of those adjectival questions, like the papers to grade are on the table. Well, which papers? The papers to grade.
And we have so many.
So many.
So it's important what Mrs. Van Out has said. If an infinitive is functioning as an adjective, it will come right after the noun that it's modifying. And that's because these kinds of infinitives, they only go in a certain place. They do not wander. So you can predict them.
Moving on. You can take a look at these examples, but we'll do the first one with you. So if you take a look at number 1, it says, your idea to spend the day together sounds great. Now, you could certainly just say your idea sounds great, but I want some more information on the idea. So I'm going to take a look at this whole phrase here. So which idea are we talking about? We're talking about the idea to spend the day together. Remember, we're working with to plus a verb. We know that's an infinitive, and that's describing which idea. So we could call this an infinitive phrase functioning as an ADJ.
Exactly. And these will start to stand out to you a little bit more as you do them. I make my classes, whenever we are looking even for just something like an infinitive, I make them find subject and a verb. That helps sometimes keep you from making mistakes. What sounds great? Idea. What's being said about idea? It sounds great. And you notice that if I stick to my question and answer, I bypass the modifiers. So I think they can do the rest of these.
Oh, absolutely. Have fun with those, you guys. Okay, and our the last iteration of infinitives will be the infinitives as adverbs. I hope you appreciate this nice picture.
It'll mean more to you later.
Yes. So an infinitive functions as an adverb when it, as a phrase, answers the question why. We know that why is an adverb question, but we don't see a lot of those with single word adverbs. So let's see where that comes into play. Check out sentence 1. Beowulf came to the Danes, why? To help them. Right? Oftentimes, if you're an athlete, you will play a game to win the game, right? And I could ask, well, why are you playing? And you say, we're playing to win. That's an adverb that functions adverbially.
Yeah, and this is the distinction between what. If you find an infinitive and it answers the question what, then it's a noun. If it answers which one, it's an adjective. If it answers why, it's an adverb.
Yes, so definitely write this down and just keep that in your mind. Oftentimes you'll see an infinitive functioning as adverb at the beginning of the sentence, right? To get to school, comma, we rode the bus. Well, why did you ride the bus? To get to school.
Yeah, that sounds great. Some more practice for you guys. So you want to do the number 1? Because I know you like to go in order.
I like to go in order. So let's take a look at number 1. First of all, I'm looking for that to plus a verb. That's kind of what we've been talking about here today, to explain the answer. So I'm going to underline the entire phrase all the way to the period here. And then I'm taking a look at my subject and verb, right? And I could ask the question right here, she came, why? To explain the answer. Because it answers the question why, I know that that infinitive is functioning adverbially.
Yeah, because it's modifying the verb.
Yes, and we could call this here answer the OV, right? That noun is associated with that infinitive phrase.
Yeah, it's just like a prep phrase has its preposition and its object, and verbals have the verbal, and they often